Hello, Sync Up listeners. We've got a special episode to celebrate OneDrive's 15th birthday, plus some new innovation announcements. We partner with the Intrazone to bring you a unique, fun episode. So, without further ado, here's the Intrazone episode on OneDrive Turns 15.
Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 intelligent intranet. I'm Mark Kashman, here with my co-host, not Chris McNulty. We've got Ankita, cloud-driven and OneDriving Kirti. Hello, Ankita.
That was such an amazing introduction. Hello, Intrazone audience. On today's episode, we celebrate OneDrive's 15th lap around the sun. Woohoo! We'll hear from Stephen Bailey, who's our CVP in the OneDrive and SharePoint Experiences Engineering, and Arwa Tyebkhan, who's the Principal Group Product Manager on OneDrive and SharePoint team. Both will help us dig into the early days of OneDrive before it was called OneDrive and some exciting new announcements rolling out soon.
Some exciting announcements, big announcements, amazing announcements. But that is right. This is going to be a hearty happy birthday to OneDrive. 15. It's been a teenager for a little bit, but 15 is a big one right before it's going to actually drive. So OneDrive can drive next year. You're going to hear all about Microsoft's cloud storage offering from its infancy and how it grew into the real glue that binds all files and sharing across Microsoft 365. And who better to do it with than you, Ankita? I feel like we've always been in parallel shows, Sync Up and the Intrazone, and very excited to have you on the Intrazone to talk about OneDrive.
Same here. I'm excited too.
Good. Well, I thought we would start by just maybe some of our own reflection. You know, we have both been working with OneDrive for quite some time, and whether it's been by nature of years or nature of ownership, I can remember, lots of things OneDrive from a consumer perspective. I've been a Hotmail user for a while, so there's been an element of OneDrive. And when it comes to my work and what I think will be of interest to the audience here, especially when you think of the SharePoint role that has been where OneDrive lives on top of from a platform perspective, in the early days before it was OneDrive and it was known as SkyDrive, I think you'll hear a lot from our guests' specifics. But there was this notion of a My Documents in a My Site. And that is effectively, in the commercial space, what OneDrive is now. And I remember the early days of the rebrand to SkyDrive, and specific to the commercial space, it was SkyDrive Pro. And, working with a lot of my peers, I was on SharePoint. They were on, this thing that was starting to get a name and become more of an entity versus a folder or destination. And it was really interesting to see, both from a marketing perspective, branding anything takes time and you want to get it right. And as we know, things evolved and changed with some things proactively and reactively. But it was also really interesting to see how the technology adapted to not just being a folder in SharePoint that was permissioned for an individual, but to become this center of gravity of sharing your files and an aggregate of, what else is going on with other files and folders. And so it was really interesting. And one historical career element for me is, like Ankita manages OneDrive for marketing today, I also got that role for about 4 months when people moved on and before we got new folks coming in. It was one of those things I got to carry for a little bit. So I feel like I was getting it ready to go off to elementary school. That's my little OneDrive history. I'm really curious. I know you are our OneDrive lead for the marketing in Microsoft 365, but I'm really interested to know you, Ankita. When did you become first aware of OneDrive, using it, working on it, anything in between?
So I think I became aware of it or started using it around the time I joined Microsoft, which was back in 2012. I was in a technical sales role at that time, so used it heavily to share a lot of documents with customers, with partners, because I used to manage partners. Yeah, internally, externally, it was heavily used. I think that was one of the reasons why I got the job that I'm doing right now. 4 years later, in 2016, I moved to the US for this role. And I remember the month I joined, I had gone to my first Ignite. And I remember Jason and my predecessor, who was about to leave the team, they got on the stage, and I was like this newcomer, extremely excited to see what everyone has to share about this product that I'm going to drive and how exciting it's going to be. And there is a room full of people, like around 1,000 people or whatever it was. And
it was truly standing room only. It was a large room that did not support everybody that wanted to hear the news of the day.
Yeah, and the news of the day began with something I had not expected. I saw Jason and my other colleagues start apologizing on stage for, I think, the sync engine at that time. And I was like, my God, what have I walked into? How people are not excited about this product right now. But it was that August, and it is the August right now. It's exactly been 6 years in this role with this product. And I have seen it grow leaps and bounds. I mean, in fact, right after that Ignite, we released the new generation Sync client, and the Sync team has not stopped since then. I mean, files on demand, KFM, silencing configuration, and so many more innovations.
It was painful in the Grove.exe days, and everything you just described to get to the point that is now OneDrive.exe, for the part that's on your desktop, doing a lot of that beautiful work that Ankita was. That's a lot. It's a lot of work that was done, but it's really interesting to hear you talk about the apology that kind of started your actual real journey with OneDrive.
Yeah, it was funny, ironical, everything. And I think in that duration, I think 2016, 2017, we were also a challenger in the Gartner quadrant. So I have seen the product actually move quadrants in within our analyst reviews. So obviously we are now a leader and much ahead. But I've seen that journey also. I've seen the journey in which customers have developed more confidence in the product, have appreciated for everything that the team is working towards, and you get the same reviews and feedback from analysts, so you know that you are actually working towards industry trends and industry expectations. So yeah, it's been a great journey, amazing product, and even a better team.
It's a hats off to a lot of people, marketing, engineering, certainly our community and MVPs, everybody that leaned in and was a part of the vocality that we heard. There's some things we needed to work on. There's also, pretty good competition out in this space, and some got a little bit, sooner than us, where it was going to be this focus of cloud storage, where we might have had a broader way of thinking about it in the older SharePoint days. But you mentioned 2016. That was a huge milestone for beyond OneDrive as well. That was a real element where we put a stake in the ground. We need to modernize. We need to meet people where they're at and maybe over-exceed. It'll take us a couple of years to get there, but I think at a good slice of time right now, celebrating 15 years, there's a lot that has not only gone into the product evolution, but there's also a notion of these are not the most common things that you find in the technology space. Anything that lives beyond 5 years, that's a really great lifespan for an app or an offering. And to see how much OneDrive, as the way that we'll look at it today, has evolved, adapted, changed. A lot of it's been driven by technology advancements, customer feedback, partnership, ways that we can plug in and enable the ecosystem. And so without letting you get further away from a lot of what you just said, my hat's off to you for carrying a lot of that in the last few years, if not, since the time that you joined. It's a lot of effort, and I think a lot of outcome that benefits now what we know of the product, but also knowing where it's coming from is what we hope a lot of the value of this episode. So I think with that, we've got a lot of things to get into. We want to talk with Stephen and Arwa and dig into both their journey and what they can share to uncover a lot of what has gone into OneDrive to get it to where it's at now. And we've also got some other components that we will share that will give you some really great history of OneDrive. But with that, let us get to our guests. Before we jump into our interview with Stephen and Arwa, we wanted to share a piece of audio from Jason Moore talking to us on a previous episode of the Interzone, where he gave us historical insight into some of the early planning and maneuvering of and for OneDrive before it was OneDrive.
OneDrive actually came out of a lot of efforts going on at Microsoft and also ones that got acquired in. For example, FolderShare was a company we acquired in 2006, I believe, and they had built a P2P sync client product. At the same time, we acquired Groove. And Groove, if you remember, became the baseline product for what became Groove in Office for syncing SharePoint and OneDrive originally, OneDrive for Business, I should say. But there were products like Mesh, Windows Live Toolbar had some capabilities here, and so on and so on and so on. We've built lots of different products and capabilities around the idea of, hey, you've got all these files. They can be on the computer. They can be in the cloud. We used to not call it the cloud. We just said they're servers. But they can be in the cloud. How do all that kind of get to a single point?
All right. So happy 15th birthday, OneDrive. Wow. So Stephen, you've been with us with OneDrive for a very, very long time. What's your earliest memory of OneDrive?
Yeah, thanks. And it's awesome to see OneDrive turning 15. What's sort of funny is OneDrive started almost the same month and year that my first daughter was born. So that's sort of how I always remember how old OneDrive is. She's turning 16, so pretty soon. I've been on OneDrive for a long, long time. And yeah, SkyDrive is what it was called when it first began. But yeah, I mean, my main memories when it first started were, way back then, it was sort of still before broadband and things like that existed. And, it was not something that, Microsoft thought was going to be something strategic or important, for the future. And so it was kind of started as sort of like just a project that, we thought was kind of interesting. It wasn't, and so it seemed like people would like to store files and back them up in the cloud and share files more easily, which were very hard things to do with, the way our file systems worked back then. And so we had started experimenting with a bunch of different things, and we actually bought this little tiny company called FolderShare way back when that was sort of, a product that let you sync files across the internet, which was a big inspiration to what became SkyDrive and OneDrive. And so those are sort of my earliest memories of the project, which, obviously it's grown into something much bigger than it was when it started. But I think that's like the biggest memory I have is sort of, having this idea that we were trying to figure out like how to actually make it come alive. And it took a little work to figure that out. And then, eventually like some other big companies came into the same space. Google Drive launched about the same time as SkyDrive, and Dropbox came out around then. And in many ways, like having some competitors in this space was great because we could all like compete and work against each other. And it was also a testament that like this was going to be a big, important place for customers. And so from there, it just sort of started to grow and get bigger and bigger. And from there, we learned from customers and how they're going to use it. And of course, broadband became more widely adopted. And, but way back then, that we had a lot of debates about this idea of like, would customers, whether consumers or businesses, really ever store their files in the cloud? That was probably the biggest debate we ever had back then, which now kind of seems crazy, but that was like the big question, like, would people really put their files in the cloud? So obviously, I think that's becoming true in reality, and we're still maybe into that journey. But yeah, that's my biggest memory from way back then.
I would say that it's come a long way, and the way that you've paralleled the growth of your child, it sounds like the growth of OneDrive, growth of your child from its infancy. You weren't sure how it was going to grow up, and I bet that there's a lot of parallels to parenting as well. Arwa, just looking back, whether it's 15 years for you or however far back you go with OneDrive, if you wanted to give it a toast on its 15th birthday, what would you want to say to OneDrive as we kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. As we celebrate OneDrive's 15th birthday, I think it's really important to acknowledge that OneDrive is here because of our customers. And so the thing that I want to say as the toast is just thank you. Thank you to everyone who has bet on OneDrive, who uses it for their work or in their personal lives. who have given us feedback and ideas over the years and who've put their trust into our product. And we really do take your trust incredibly seriously every day in our work. And so thank you for this journey of 15 years and counting. I'll also mention gratitude to our truly incredible team who work with passion and care and commitment every day to make OneDrive all it can be. And yeah, Stephen, happy birthday to your daughter as well. That's amazing.
Thank you. I hope that OneDrive is further along than as a teenager, but
I want to dig that into a little bit more. Maybe a little bit later in the episode, you can help us compare the teenage years with your daughter, and maybe what OneDrive was like as a teen when it first moved into its teens.
I think Jason has a similar story. Even I think his son was also born in the same year or something like that. He's also shared. So we have a couple of proud fathers here for OneDrive. Stephen, you were talking about how in the beginning the main decision was, will customers save their files in the cloud? But tell us a little bit more about the moving from SharePoint My Documents to OneDrive. What was the most significant requirement that came from maybe customers, or there was a market trend or analysts, or what was an important technical design choice?
I think that there's like two angles to this. There's the sort of customer perspective, and then there was sort of like the internal engineering choices that we made along the way. I'm the engineering leader for OneDrive. And so I would say, like, from an internal point of view, some of the biggest technical choices we made were really like betting on Azure. Microsoft 15 years ago wasn't really a cloud company. Azure was just starting back then. And as Microsoft transitioned from building, more shrink wrap software to cloud services, that journey was challenging in the early days at Microsoft, because every team was kind of building their own services and infrastructure from the ground up, including OneDrive and SharePoint. And as Azure started to mature, one of the biggest bets we made was really betting on Azure pretty early, especially for Azure storage. And then over time, for more and more of what we use to run OneDrive and SharePoint. And so I would say that's probably like one of the biggest technical bets that we made, or decisions internally. And then I would say, like, externally, really, like, the most critical thing from customers was really about like the ease of use of OneDrive, making it something that's just very simple, basic, easy to use. As users go through this evolution of like having files locally and being really used to that, a lot of users don't even understand folders and stuff like that. So, we're already coming into a space that is kind of complex for some customers. And so really and then backing all of that up and moving it to the cloud and maintaining local copies and all of this stuff is kind of complex. And so the ways that we solved that in the early days were kind of, tricky and complex, and customers didn't understand it. So most of the feedback that we got was like, just make this super simple. And so a lot of the work that we did really around how we integrate OneDrive into Windows is probably one of the biggest things that we've done to make it easy for customers to use OneDrive. Everything from, what we call cloud files to how we do folder backup now, just sort of all the integration that we did to really just bring OneDrive really deeply into Windows, just so that as a customer and end user, you don't have to think too much about OneDrive. You just put your files in a folder and everything's backed up. They're there when you need them. Everything just works. That's pretty much what we've learned is everything just has to work. And as soon as OneDrive complains or you get a red X or says that there's a problem, we have failed to do our job. And so, that's the biggest feedback. So there's just a ton of work that we do internally to try to just stay silent, stay out of the way, but make everything work. That's definitely the feedback that we've got in the early days, especially with OneDrive for Business.
Putting it right in the heart of Windows, I think there's that great power/responsibility meme, but you really scaled, to a level that it was just front and center. But to your point of when things go wrong, it's not when they visit the OneDrive website, it's right there in the bottom right of their Windows experience. And I think, you also mentioned the notion of this move to the cloud, this scale now that we're at with Azure++. In the early days, I think we had a lot of proof points around Windows Update and Hotmail. And now it's what isn't cloud, but certainly in the early days. And maybe, Arwa, I'm curious, if you look at those early days that Stephen was describing in your own experience, how would you define it today, as a core element of Windows still? But beyond that, how would you say the role of OneDrive is within Microsoft 365 and any very particular customer problems or scenarios that you're focusing on or driving to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when our story started in 2007, our focus then was on building out the basic capabilities needed for our cloud storage system to be complete. And since then, our core value prop has evolved from, you can share a file or you can access it, to you can collaborate with internal team members and external colleagues reliably, seamlessly, and securely across all form factors, whether desktop, mobile, and web. And so as I reflect on OneDrive's role today, I would describe OneDrive as the file solution for M365. Number one, it is the hero app where customers can access and work with all of their files across the ecosystem, no matter where those files are stored, whether it's in my OneDrive, in a document library, or in a team. And our purpose here is to enable customers to be more productive, collaborate effectively with others, and to do so with peace of mind, knowing that their files are safe. In addition, I really think of OneDrive as a platform that provides a coherent file experience across M365 as well. So this includes experiences such as the file super picker, the files browser, the share dialog, the share checklist, and the file card, enabling, scenarios across not just OneDrive applications, but also Office, Teams, Outlook, Yammer, and more.
I can say that I have had the most benefit from a most recent feature of the Add to OneDrive. Because truly, I have 4 main projects that I work on, the intro zone being one of them, where I navigate often to effectively a shared library that I have, that exists, to share with sometimes 7 people, sometimes up to several hundred people. But for me, it's just I move from one folder to the other, and this other folder happens to be in a distinct group scenario. But for me, on my desktop, when I'm in the web, on my mobile device, I just go from one folder to the next and I access exactly what I need. So that one, I thank you for the team very much every day.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And I love your scenario. It's something we take incredibly seriously. And we talk about this space as one of item keeping and being able to get to your files no matter where they are. And so without breaking any news here, it's an area we continue to work on pretty deeply and we'll have upcoming news around as well.
So that was a great scenario, the Add to OneDrive scenario that Mark just mentioned. And I know, Arwa, your team has been working, you along with the other OneDrive teams have been working on solving a lot of such customer problems. Could you share a few that are top of mind for the team in general?
Yeah, for sure. This is something we consider deeply every day. So a few important customer needs come to mind. I'll mention a few. First, we think about our end users who use OneDrive either at work or at home. How do we enable our customers to seamlessly get to their files from anywhere without having to worry about device constraints? And, this is where our investments across endpoints on desktop, mobile, or web, or features like files on demand or sync, or offline access on mobile come in. Another that I can think of, most of us have a growing collection of digital content. And in a world where we are collaborating with many others, the files we care about are really spread across many different locations. And this creates real challenges for our customers in finding and getting back to a file at a later date. So let me take a step back and share an example here. I may be looking for a file, but I may only remember that this file was shared to me by Mark, or that it was something that was discussed in a meeting that Ankita set up. But I may not remember the file name or the specific location that it's stored in. And we consider these user jobs around finding and access to be so core to what OneDrive needs to be excellent at. More on this in a second. This is also where our many investments in the area of namespace come in, like we just talked about, getting to a predictable navigation system, our updated quick access list, or enabling customers to organize their own or their team's content in their own namespace with Add to OneDrive. Then I'll also mention our customers want and need to collaborate on their content with different folks, whether it's on their own team or maybe even with folks on an external tenant, and they need to do so securely. We aim to make it easy for customers to share and to do so with a lot of control and access management options so they can be confident that only the intended audience will actually see the content that they shared. And then the last challenge that I'll mention for today, for our IT admin customers, we understand the challenges around seamless deployment or ensuring compliance requirements are met at all times, and to easily manage everything at an organizational level, whether it's controlling sharing policies or storage limits or retention policies or more. And so this is where our investments in things like Windows known folders on OneDrive Sync or OneDrive Admin Sync report or a centralized admin center for OneDrive and SharePoint. This is where these type of investments are really critical to our customer needs.
That's a great point, Arwa, and a great segue to the question that I wanted to ask Stephen. So, Stephen, as you mentioned, at the time when we were releasing OneDrive, your main concern or your main target was to kind of make folks understand that how to get the files in the cloud. And that's the main concept. And Arwa and I have been working very closely on the value proposition and how we envision OneDrive and how it's evolved from just files in the cloud to powering files experience across Microsoft 365, as she mentioned. So what are your thoughts on this evolution about OneDrive supporting things like Teams and Teams meeting recordings and loop components? What's your impression now compared to the early days?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just the responsibility. I think Arwa touched on it great that, basically, we're the file system for M365, and the transition of that from being something that's local or, using SMB shares, things like that, to being, a cloud file system that is deeply integrated into every product in M365, as well as a platform that, other products, even third parties, are using to sort of extend, the M365 file system. We support customers all the way from, consumers and families to students. Both my kids use M365 at their schools, all the way up to big companies, small businesses, governments. The amount of responsibility we have, I think, is just through the roof, and we don't take that lightly. We know that we basically handle some of the most important information that people have in their lives, and so it's just absolutely critical that everything just works. We never lose anything. We're up all the time. Sometimes we've talked about the service that we provide as, it's sort of like the electric grid or, water, that it's so critical to people's lives that we have to be, completely reliable and up all the time. And people need to be able to depend on us 100%. And so that's, I would say, that the thing that is different between when we first started, of like, would people really ever store files into the cloud, to now where we are today, where obviously millions and millions of people are doing it and depend on us every second of every day for, doing a great job at that. So that's probably the biggest theme, I would say, that exists today.
With this evolution of the platform always growing and always taking on new scenarios, new file types, and very new scenarios like what Microsoft Loop offers, is there any just engineering insights into what we do if there is that instance of Loop where we can say, the platform was in this state, and to enable Loop, we had to do X or Y? Because I think there's so much innovation over the years with real-time collaboration and the ability to share, and like you said, the always-on grid element of the entire platform. But I think our audience would also just be interested in, hey, we came up with this idea Loop, and we needed to adjust the files platform in a way to accommodate it. If there's any insights that you could share.
Yeah, Loop is super interesting, and it's pushed a lot of evolution in our platform. Obviously, like the thing that's really emerged is just, being able to work on documents together with other people and being able to do that in real time. For that to be an absolutely stellar experience requires really great engineering across the full stack, everything, and especially our storage platform. And so in our team specifically, there's been a bunch of very specific innovation around our storage platform to support loop and fluid type documents, really around performance and how to really enable that real-time collaboration. So things around, like when you are typing or inserting text into a document, how do you make that appear for all the other users who are editing the document at the same time, as well as also get persisted into our storage, into the storage platform so that edit's not lost. Being able to do that in a way that delivers on, 10 millisecond performance for everyone is a very hard challenge. And so that's where Fluid has really been developing over the last couple of years and required a ton of deep innovation in our platform to enable it. And all that's going to come to life. You've seen a lot of it come to life in Loop components, as well as the Loop product that's going to be coming out this year.
Last comment here, I've just been talking about Loop a little bit in some of our customer engagements and hearing what people's response to it is. And the thing I love is you get to show a nice demo of Loop and end user eyes open up. And I also get to say the statement, and it's just a file stored in OneDrive, and IT sort of sits back down and relaxes, which is really nice to be able to see and, of course, to have that be the real story of what's going on. Arwa, if we were to move to the news of the day, there's a lot that we can do to look back on OneDrive and how we got here and how the teams have been working together across engineering excellence and OneDrive design elements that just make it more accessible. But we're here also to align with some news, some new features that you're bringing out. If you can enumerate them or talk about them at a high level so that our audience can know what's new about OneDrive.
Absolutely. We are super excited to share a sneak peek of a new home experience for your OneDrive. Our focus here is to enable easy finding and access of your files so you can, as soon as you start your day, you can quickly be productive without having to remember or navigate through your file system. And so with this new home experience, we'll present to you your most recently used files as those are the ones you're most likely to want to get back to and continue working on. We'll also recommend files that may be of interest to you based on collaboration activity that your team is participating in. We'll have smart filters and pivots to make finding files that much easier. And so all of this will start to roll out in the coming months, and we'll be listening very closely to everyone's feedback. Really excited.
So the home experience is when somebody clicks on OneDrive and they get that kind of first run experience of all their files. Is it accurate to say that also when people see files in Teams, or if you go to office.com, it is that OneDrive experience that you've mentioned before and now in the home experience that is consistent and is powered by some of those same capabilities to share, to see recent files and essentially to be able to pick up on your work where you left off?
Yeah, I love that question, Mark. Thank you for asking that. Yes. So our North Star vision, our absolute goal here is to ensure a coherent experience for your files, no matter where you are. And so the work we're doing actively is not only bringing this type of innovation for ease of use and access and finding your stuff to the OneDrive core apps, but also bringing these similar views and the OneDrive app experience embedded in other places in the M365 ecosystem where you're likely going to use files. Teams is a great example of this. And so something we're actively working towards is bringing this goodness of OneDrive into the Files app that exists in Teams. And so we're really excited about that path forward so that if users are in Teams and that's the hub that they really live and spend their days in for productivity, we don't want to ask them to have to move to another app to be able to access their files. We want them to be productive right where they are.
All of that sounds amazing. And we have a blog post for our audience as well to learn more about this. Check out a sizzle video to kind of see the experience as well that Arwa and team have worked on. And all of us are really, really excited for your feedback. So amazing stuff. Arwa, any last top of mind or broader themes for the future that we can share today?
Yeah. In terms of broader themes, I think there are three I'd love to call out, as this is really our focus as we think about how to continue to evolve and innovate in our product. So the first I'll call out is peace of mind. We want our customers to be at peace knowing that their files are safely in OneDrive. If you lose your device or are subject to a cyber attack, which is something that is more and more common today, OneDrive has your back, allowing you to recover your files with ease. When you upgrade to a new Windows device, you can restore your files. And if you share your files, you can be at peace knowing that it's shared securely. The second I'll call out is simple and delightful. And this is where our investments in something like OneDrive's home experience comes in. We aim to make it really easy for you to get to your files and get productive. And then third, I think this really speaks to me and I hold this dear to my heart. We really want to save our customers time. Time is arguably the most valuable asset any of us have. And if OneDrive can save our customers time and effort and gain efficiencies, whether at home or at work, we will consider that a huge success.
Those are some broad and bold, ambitious goals, which I don't think are anything new to the OneDrive team, especially knowing where it got its start and where it's gone to. And I think a lot of what you've accomplished has been, how can we simplify the things that people do every day and have that be recognizable no matter where they do it from. So kudos to the themes and the goals. And I would say to some of them, you've already accomplished them. Go further. We thought, just to wrap up, a question to both Stephen and you, Arwa, but maybe start with Stephen, thinking in terms of what's happened behind the scenes. You've shared some things, but has there been anything that specifically happened that was a big left turn or a right turn or a learning experience or advice that you had gotten from any of the leadership over the years? Or maybe even something that your daughter said, hey, here's a feature that I need that for my next school project, as we turn both the same year. But Stephen, anything that you've heard as advice or just a behind the scenes story you'd like to share before we leave?
Yeah, probably like one of the biggest interesting things, and I know this was pretty public, but when Windows 8 shipped, OneDrive had an integration with Windows 8 called Placeholders that had a lot of challenges, and we ended up pulling it out and then sort of redoing the entire architecture. And that was a pretty painful decision for internally, but also for customers. That's probably a pretty interesting one to reflect and go deeper on at some point. What we learned from that, and some of the mistakes that we made internally, and how we built that, and then we came back at it and built something I think that is much better for customers. And so, but obviously super painful to put our customers through that journey. But that's a pretty interesting, I think, point in time history in OneDrive. The external one, and my daughter, we just went on vacation to Italy. My family uses OneDrive, but I wouldn't say that they're passionate lovers of OneDrive. And this is all consumer usage. But obviously, I'm a big user of OneDrive and put all my photos in it, just like a lot of customers do. The thing we're really working on trying to make better is our photo experiences in OneDrive. For a long time, we focused on collaboration and productivity and stuff like that. But customers, they back up all their stuff into OneDrive, and a lot of that stuff is photos. And so we really want to make OneDrive, especially in the consumer space, just amazing at sharing photos. And so we were trying to do a bunch of stuff around photos with my family while we were on vacation, and my kids kind of get frustrated by it. So they've given me a bunch of feedback on how we need to make our product better for photos. And so we're working on a bunch of stuff there. And so Arwa didn't share any detail there, but you'll see a lot of, I think, awesome photos stuff coming out in the next year with OneDrive.
So I think it's important to note that, as history will tell us, we really went from Windows 7 to Windows 10, if that's what I heard you say. And the fact that in our release notes, when there's this update to OneDrive, I hope that your daughter gets credit for some of the features that we release. Arwa, I know you've certainly been under a lot of great leadership working with Stephen and team and your own team that you have that report to you. Anything around, inside baseball that we can think of or hear from you about a behind the scenes or advice that you got?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I really love the question and the introspection behind it. So I'll share a piece of advice that Jeff Deeper, someone who's well known to this audience. He's our CVP for OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and Mesh. So something that Jeff has shared with the team, and this isn't from one particular moment, but something he reminds us of when we're faced with difficult moments, whether it's difficult moments related to technology decisions or prioritization or something that's happening on the team. He'll say, we have our roles because of our customers. Our customers are why we do what we do every day. And I really credit him and the sentiment as a starting point that's so core to our team culture and ethos. And so it's something I love to remember.
And I think that is a perfect transition. Hearing from both of you, thank you for your insights on the product and your journey, and of course, its journey. Happy 15th, but also congratulations to you and the team. And taking that notion of customer first, and I think always that's a direction that TPER has guided both you, us in marketing, and I think really upholds a lot of the value that Microsoft brings through its products, that it's informed very much from customer. But thank you for the time today. Thank you for your time and voice on the IntroZone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Ankita. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you again to our guests, Stephen Bailey and Arwa Tyebkhan, for being on the show and for giving us a look back and forward on all things OneDrive then and now. To learn more about OneDrive and the latest developments, please follow our tech community blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog.
And once you are up to speed on all things OneDrive, we of course encourage you to check out our show page for links to all of what we discussed today and more. You can go to aka.ms/theinterzone. And if you have any questions or you have feedback for OneDrive, for SharePoint, for anybody here at Microsoft, you can always reach us through email at theinterzone@microsoft.com or via Twitter at SharePoint, at OneDrive, at mkashman, and at Ankita_Kirti21.
Share a link, rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. Follow the show wherever you get your favorite tech podcasts.
And thank you so much for listening. We're your hosts, Mark Kashman and Ankita Kirti. This was the IntroZone plus the Sync Up, a show about the Microsoft 365 Ready Player OneDrive Intelligent Intranet.
Yay!